Hello, welcome back to the Double Swing. We've got another one coming to you before we've even really seen the results for anything else. So we've got nothing to update you on, just another exciting event to preview. This one, pretty much the pinnacle of 1.5 level sort of CS. Not tier 1, not tier 2. These are all the teams currently scrapping to break into that top echelon, and it's the IEM Katowice play-in, so this is a great opportunity for them to do so. Joining us on the show today is Trav, who hasn't featured on the show before. I've been trying to get new guests on to start the season off, because last year I think at the end I was just like repeats, try and get the same people on. I already know who they are, but now we're doing it properly. We've got a new guest. Trav, how are you doing? Looking forward to this event?
Absolutely, mate. Yeah, I'm doing well. I had that lovely time at the HLTV Awards. Always a lovely time to sort of culminate the year of 2024, and then back into the casting 2025. Obviously, a bit of an unknown when it comes to what events they'll be out there to work. It's always the same being a freelance commentator at the beginning of the year. But I got some bits and pieces out there in the tier 2 circuit, and very much looking forward to it and watching as many events as possible. So I immerse myself at every given moment.
It helps when tier 2 events are VRS ranked, so
Indeed.
that would help.
CCT 17, please save us.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lord, that's a disaster, a mess of their own making that has then backfired on everyone else, to be honest. There's no two ways about it. That grid shadow ban system is just nonsensical to anyone else looking in. Are you tired of looking like a chump in game? Sick of opening cases and getting trash skins? Check out Skin Club via my link in the description for a 7% deposit bonus. For gamers 18 or older, Skin Club is a case opening service who run a provably fair opening algorithm to give you truly random outcomes. Skin Club's battles mode has been upgraded, adding new things like crazy, team, and share modes just to make every roll a little more intense and a little more fun. I played a battle or two and managed to win some pretty crazy skins and upgraded a group of them into a gorgeous MP9 hot rod. Perfect for some gold stickers. There is an awards event going on right now, so you can earn event points just by playing on the site. These points can be redeemed for cases, skins, and entries into huge giveaways. Skin Club accept a wide variety of payment methods from cards and PayPal to skins themselves, as well as a range of crypto coins. Remember to play responsibly using the self-care tools provided, and use my link in the description to get a 7% bonus. A big thank you to Skin Club for supporting my channel. Here we go. Hopefully they'll sort that out. Hopefully Tier 2 can rebuild and continue to provide the value it used to in terms of those sorts of cups. But we had a pre-show decision. You chose to go second. Second in the draft order. And I will be leading things off, so I might as well get straight into it. And pick, I think, the most valuable pick there is to take here. Heroic slip down into the underdog tier for this somehow. I'm going to be honest, somehow. For me, they are not an underdog. They should be one of the favorites given the way they've played with this roster. But I'll take it. That's an easy pick for me. Look, when they rebuilt from nothing, having lost everyone, I immediately came out and said I love the addition of the Sangal core, taking a risk on star players like Nilo, like some Pius, absolutely worth doing. The fact that we end up in this situation where Nilo can't actually play for whatever reason, Tanir comes in, now has visa issues, we have Madden filling in, I don't think actually matters that much. Tanir didn't carry that hard, didn't actually find that much impact in most maps they played, but they were able to lean on some Pius, the calling, Linus's fragging, and then the surprise, I think, pop-offs of Youngster, which a lot of people who aren't familiar with the team were completely shocked by. Sangal, if you ever watched it back in the day, when it falls apart, Youngster drags them through. I think they've still got plenty enough to come through here, and as an underdog, their opening matchup, quite interesting. It's Liquid, the team they've already beaten, followed up by a big game against either Complexity or Eternal Fire. They might have to go through the lower bracket considering they have to beat two of what are, for me, probably the top 11 sort of teams in the world to go straight through. But once they drop down to the lower bracket, things get a lot easier for them. Probably an easy matchup with Cole, or at worst, a lower echelon team from somewhere else in this bracket. So I'm happy with Heroic going through sort of in an ugly way, but off the back of that firepower, as I said, from Pius, from Youngster, and actually surprisingly from Linus.
Yeah, I mean, I actually really like this Heroic team. It's not just the fact that it is the Sangal core, like you say, and they've sort of worked their way through to this point, and Heroic were, forced to pick them up to stay relevant in these tournaments, right? They had no other option really to get themselves involved. And yeah, I think the Youngster, as you say, is a surprise to probably many. I mean, people who see him being one of the main men is great, and could be a bit surprised. I particularly liked Tanier and some of the opening games he played with the team, and I think he got I think he did get the visa right for Blast, if I'm not mistaken. I did see that news come through recently, so I think
he did.
I'm pretty sure he got the visa. I saw him tweet it. I'm pretty certain.
Ooh,
I'm going to quickly double check that right now.
That's awesome. Yeah, if that's true, sorry, I need to amend what I've said, because I was going off the assumption that the Blast roster, was one thing. This roster,
okay.
I was in my head about still seeing Madden. That's on me. But yeah, no, if at Kato they should have Tanier, I'm going to hype this up based on everything else.
15 hours ago, visa received, see you in Kato.
Perfect.
So not Blast, but Kato, yeah, sorry.
He will be in Kato. He should be, honestly, just based off what I saw from Gun 5 and a couple of the good maps early on, he'll be a massive X factor when he gets active. I think for them, it's weird that you're going to talk about Sun Pius and Youngster first, then X-Cloud and Tanier second, but still, that's what we saw in the first couple series, and the fact that they can then add on with those two guys popping off and arriving in the way we know they can, gorgeous, delightful, stupidly underrated here.
Yeah, and the reason they are underrated is the fact that the tournament that they're playing in currently hasn't concluded yet. So we actually don't have like a prize pool shift. It's only really like the elo that's affected the rankings as of yet. And so I guess timing wise, this is a steal of an underdog pick in that category. I can't hate the strategy though. I mean, there's definitely a lot of potential with Tanier back in the roster, some Pius getting another chance at it, and I mean, he didn't have like incredible output, but there were some key moments from some Pius so far in the from the Blast Bounty, and so I'm fine with this team. I do think a lot of my excitement about them is actually just largely leveraged off of the Sangal core, because I don't know how much of that was Jota and like snap decision making, how much that was him being kind of set up to succeed. They always had to work with a worse AWPer than some Pius, so I don't know. The team definitely has legs, and I guess I'm keen to see how they improve. But I'm also hesitant with like all the weird roster things that are happening on this team to put my eggs in that basket just yet.
Yeah, I do agree with that. As I kind of described it when I was sort of talking about them on with friends and stuff, it is just Sangal with one massive upgrade and some Pius, right? And like, sure, you maybe lose a little bit from losing Jota, but I think Tanier is actually pretty much made up for that in current times. I think to be fair, we don't necessarily know how good Jota would be at this level. We've seen him, one Pro League for Sangal, so it's only really one example. But yeah, I think the fact that you have some Pius, like, I don't want to do Samey dirty, but some Pius is 10 times the AWPer Samey was, really. Like, it's just the truth. So yeah, it really makes a big difference. And yeah, I'm excited to see how they go in the future. Some Pius will wing back up to playing the sort of level of Counter-Strike again. I think there's a lot of legs to this team. And yeah, whatever they plan to do, I mean, as you say, it's a bit of a mess. I mean, having Madden and Nilo on the bench, we don't know whether Nilo's going to come in. It sounds like he's now going to, according to Heroic statement, going to like fight for his spot pretty much. I don't know if it's like, obviously some personal issues. I don't really want to speculate. It would be a bit rude of me too. But yeah, I think if to have Tanier as that sort of secondary option, I actually thought when I was watching so much of Gun 5, it was more Casello that was the player that was, the one to watch for the future. Tanier's a little bit older, maybe been around the block a bit. Maybe that's why Heroic chose him for these events. And I think, he's honestly done pretty okay considering the situation he's been thrust into.
Is that how that's pronounced?
Casello, Zelo. Yeah, I've always said like Zelo or Casello. I know my co-caster Hayes says Casello because he heard it from someone a long, long time ago. I just try and match him. So when we cast, I've just kind of been saying Casello, but I've also said Zelo or whatever, or Zelo.
Yeah,
it's quite hard to say.
I mean, I read it as yellow, like something like that, and I was just like,
yes, yeah.
I would never have even imagined Casello, but that's always the reminder that the Russian-speaking season has its own leet speak that creates new languages, essentially, from nowhere. Hegev being the great example. But no, okay. No, I see. When I watched Gun 5, for me, it was like a two-pronged thing. It was like Cielo on the hard opener. If I need an explosive fast play, I've got that thrust. But if I also have a bit of a spread, map control, a take on a site, and I need a lurk, I need a close, I need just that extra win condition to confirm around, that was my typical Tnir round. That was the Tnir round that defined him. Because sure, he could play over the shoulder of Ziello. He can play on the entries, just in the pack, not so much the leader, but in the pack, and find good frags over the shoulder. As I said, that's his thing. Like, judging that space and that timing, he was pretty good at it. Not quite as cerebral as Nilo in my eyes, but more explosive as a fragger, and that's what I liked about him. So when they brought him in instead of Nilo, I was like, oh, we're just talking about like pretty much the same guy, just with a slight tweak and exactly how they approach it. So it's going to work either way if that's the mindset. And Saw, credit to Saw. This, we always have to say it. He does a lot for Heroic. He might be one of the most valuable pieces in terms of coaches in the game. Yeah, huge this rebuild so far. Number 2 pick though, Trav. You can go anywhere with this. You've got every favorite open to you. Only one underdog gone. So who are you taking?
Yeah, so I mean, a favorite, I just think an absolute lock that has to make it through right now. I'm going to take it, Eternal Fire. I just think they have a pretty decent draw with Complexity. We don't really know what the Complexity are really going to look like. It was okay in some of the games we saw, but the reality is we just don't have the star firepower. Xantares is still doing Xantares things. You've got Jota now, and sure, he hasn't been like stunning on this Eternal Fire team yet, like it was in Sangal, but things are very different now. Like, you've got Xantares and Wakadia on the team, for goodness sake, right? Like, he's not going to be always going to be the main man. It's going to be those two very often. So, yeah, I think, sure, Eternal Fire have fumbled a few big events, especially the Major. That was a massive sort of blot on their copybook last year. But just with the draw they have, as you kind of described with Heroic, the top sort of 4 teams there is actually a very tough portion of this play-in bracket. Liquid, Heroic, Complexity, Eternal Fire. You've got the possibility of really, for like any 3 of those, I would say maybe Complexity is the least likely. So I think definitely they make it through lower bracket, even though it's a hard portion. I just feel like if it's Liquid they play, for example, they have more to them right now than Liquid, and Liquid are still sort of finding their feet with Nerds, and they still have their same issues I've seen with the previous iteration of Liquid, where they have really good CT sides, but their T sides can be a bit questionable, especially on some more T focus maps like Nuke, for example, for Liquid. So, yeah, I'm going to take Eternal Fire. Tough portion of the bracket, but I think their players are just too good, pretty much.
Yeah, we kind of discussed them for the Blast Bounty, and I think part of the criticisms that we raised were, or at least that I wanted to raise, was that I don't think they actually have space for Jota to make use of him in the same sort of archetype that actually impressed from Sangal or even from Eternal Fire Academy. Like, he's moved basically into Calyx positions, and that's not very conducive to him having any real influence on the game, unfortunately. Yeah. Like, somebody has to give space over to him. It's either Rakadia, Walksick, really. Those are the 2 main pieces that I can think of. Or Madger has to, I don't know, like ninjutsu clone himself and throw flashes everywhere on the map simultaneously. Like, there has to be some concession made by the other rifling heavy hitters or the AWPer, and you're not going to take that responsibility from Xantares. So that's my worry about Jota. Like, he has to actually evolve as a player, and he's, in my understanding, he's not actually played those types of roles basically ever, because he's always been good enough to warrant being set up as opposed to being the guy that sets everyone else up. So that's my main worry for the sort of development of Eternal Fire. I do think, they have an easier first round match than some teams in this part of the bracket, but I think the fact that they are on that more difficult, I guess, harder to call segment with Liquid and Heroic, I think I would have hesitated to pick this team. I think.
I just have a feeling. I've always been on their side when it comes to Eternal Fire. So I don't know. I do think they have a more, like, their A game can sort of beat everyone in this entire play-in for sure. Their B game can beat sort of half of them, and maybe like a B plus C game or B minus C game is a bit, it would be very close versus Liquid and Heroic. Let's say that in the lower bracket, whoever they face.
Yeah, well, winners match. Hopefully for them, they don't. They lose to Cole. Yeah. I'll be genuinely alarmed. Yes. No, this Eternal Fire. That's it. When they're on there, hotter than anyone. Realistically, when they're on their A game, when they're on their best, when they're playing that's really explosive, powerful CS with Xantares and Wikadia, they're up there with almost everyone. We're talking Katowice main event too. Like, they can be that like high performant of a roster. It's just a question of getting that out of them consistently, and that a lot of that comes down to calling, structure, and having other reliable things work other than just shooting. And yeah, I mean, I agree with the Jota concerns. I think we voiced this obviously in the last episode talking about Blast Bounty. The kind of the solution is, I'm sorry, Woxic, you're not the win condition. The rifle play on this team is. It's a very rifle-focused team. On T side, you're going to have to take a way further backseat. Like, I'm not talking the back row. I'm talking the trunk. Like, you're kind of just there. Like, no one really notices you. Hopefully, that's the intention. And then you're fine. So, yeah, no, I have the same concerns in terms of their bracket, obviously. Looking at it, if it's a tough bracket like this, and I can get a cheeky underdog that I think's got similar odds, I'll take it. But otherwise, man, Eternal Fire, Liquid, when you look at everything just by itself, you think those two are the two, like, probably strongest favorites, right? But they're in the same portion. Man, all of a sudden picking them gets a lot more challenging. I would have been tempted to the same extent, though. I'm going to be honest. If I was in your position, I'd probably take the same pick. They are just, in terms of top side, the strongest roster, I think, here.
Like, irresistible in a way, aren't they?
They are.
Like,
they're a jewel, You just have to reach out. You want to touch it.
I think if I had to really be critical of management for Eternal Fire, I like, who are their late game players? Like, if I'm thinking who I want in a clutch situation, it's honestly it's Major, weirdly.
That's crazy, yeah.
And maybe Wicardia, maybe. But
he's been
alright. But I think
feel like
Calix
he makes too many late round mistakes, though. I've seen so many like over pushes from Wicardia, so yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but then it's like even then, like, Calix was kind of like a half measure when you put him in late rounds. Like, Jota isn't really that guy, so he either has to develop into that or find a new way to stretch his legs. Because I actually worry nobody's going to give an inch to him. As much as I believe Eternal Fire have done a really good job of rejigging their system over the many different iterations, I worry that they're just going to stick with what they know works now and then just be like, you just have to do Calix's roles, man. Good luck.
Are you saying like they would have used more of an X-Cloud player than a Jota player then?
Yes.
Like,
I think they would have benefited from that more.
Yeah. It's really funny, right? Because I remember when they first like had that, you spoke about the roster merry-go-round. Like, I thought they were making absolutely terrible mistakes when they got rid of X-Cloud at that original point. Like, was it a year and a half, 2 years ago, or whatever it is now at this point? And he sort of moved on to Sangal. I was like, oh god, like, X-Cloud was one of them, I think, like a very underrated piece of their team. And then they sort of elevate themselves to new heights. And you're like, okay, well, I guess I was wrong. Wicardia is just like now incredible entry player on Vertigo, for example, and now they don't have that anymore. So not just that, but the map too. So yeah, it's like. I do like X-Cloud, but it's a question of, would you want to bring him back again? I guess that's their logic of, okay, we've tried and tested him with this particular team. We thought we needed to move on. Let's try something different. A player we already had on loan anyway. Like, we can just bring him back. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a cheap, high-value roster move.
Yeah.
So it does make sense why they've done it. It's just, I don't think it actually makes that much sense for all the role cells out there.
Yeah, roll cells be damned, though. Firepower always wins. That's always been true and will never be disproven. So keep fragging. Yumi, 2 picks now just for you. Your favorites are on the board. I know you love them.
I know, man. But I don't want them. I'm glad. I'm happy to not pick this team and then be proven wrong, and then maybe I'll be coaxed into it, and then they'll bomb out later. That's just how I do. So I'm gonna go with Pain. I think we talked about this for the Blast Bounty as well. Just the idea that they removed Lux, who is a player that gained new confidence, had been playing honestly his most confident Counter-Strike and most aggressive Counter-Strike we'd ever seen, for a Davideus with a little bit more veteran elements to him and can be just as explosive. Pain are a fun team. They always have been, but I feel like they've somehow gotten more exciting with the addition of Davideus. So I don't know. I feel like I would be repeating myself a lot from Blast Bounty, and because he can win rounds. Snow, to be honest, I thought would be a bigger hitter on this team. But if Big Uzera and Davideus are finding entries on extremities or in the opening 15 to 20 seconds of a map, this team's gonna have a good time, and they're usually gonna run over people. And I think against a VP that I don't think have put themselves. I don't think they've really put themselves out there as like a team that can be feared just yet. They have Flamus, they have IC, who I'm gaining more respect for IC as time goes on. I think Pain actually will prove to be a tough fight, and then they have to deal with either Soul or GamerLegion on the other side of the bracket. And to be honest, my instincts thought, who's the team that's going to go up against Soul? They're probably going to win that matchup, because I think Soul are really, really bad right now. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Trav, I'm going to let you talk about this Pain team because, yeah, as we said, so far we've gone 3 for 3 on teams that were featured in the Blast Bounty. So
Right.
I want your take on this. How much do you rate this team? Do you get to watch them very often? Like, what's your outlook on them?
Well, actually, like I get to watch them a bit more than maybe I expect sometimes, right? Because I think this season, or sorry, last season and the season before, I had quite a lot of ASL Challenge League South America, and obviously that's before all VRS madness and all the big teams pull out of those ECLs. So, yeah, I saw them play a lot, and a lot with Lux as well. And I thought Lux was pretty stunning online. But I think it was a significant fall off that he had on LAN. Sure, has his moments still. He has his individual rounds which can change games. I am surprised they moved on from him. I think at the time I heard the news, I was like, that's a bit of a shame. Like, isn't it one of these situations where he's going off to play with a friend in a different Brazilian team? Was it Nissim on Legacy? Is it, if I remember correctly?
yes,
It's like, why have you done that when Pain is not? You could have. Is that Pain's decision? Is that your decision? Like, I don't really know. But if you're going to choose a player to replace him with, then Davides is super, super cool. I've loved this guy for a very, very long time. One of my first ever ESL casts in like early 2021 was like a DreamHack qualifier, and he dropped 111 kills in a BO3. It was one map went to a really long overtime, but still he dropped like 68 in that map. I loved him ever since like day one, pretty much. I always thought he was sick. He puts Chilean Counter-Strike on the map for the region. It's like him and Huaso Peak is like the two only players really that sort of flying the flag for them. I think he's pretty explosive on Red Canids. He had his slight fall off on LAN, but Red Canids were, let's say, dysfunctional, I would say, and especially lots of mid-round situations when the pressure was really high. You looked at the Red Canids team, they had really decent results online and a few LANs, like regional LANs, you were like, ooh, this Red Canids can make a major. We're going to have cool Fox stickers, it's going to be amazing. And then pressure really seemed to get to the team as a whole, and Coldzera comes out in an interview saying these youngsters need to learn how to hold W. No, mate, that wasn't the issue. The issue was the mid-rounding under pressure, which I feel like you could take a bit more responsibility for.
I mean, they were playing with 4 players on Red Canids.
Yeah, Nithon.
When David was there, they were playing with 4 players.
Nithon
used to AWP, and then they had Henny, and it's like, okay, so he's not AWPing, and now he's just being handheld by Davideus the whole time, actually.
Yeah, like, that was a real big issue. It's not just that. It's not just the mid-rounding, sorry. It is definitely the Nithon problem too. But Davideus was definitely held back by that whole Red Canids mess for a long period of time. And now he's on Pain under the leadership of Big Azera, probably the best IGL in Brazil, deserves his shot at a Furia type team one day. Like, we've been saying that for years at this point. He's really ascended a little bit, and in the few small examples we've seen in Davideus with Big Azera, it's looked really, really good. So yeah, again, I do think there's a world that VP could have a performance, a good Davideus performance, in the form of Flamus, right? Flamus could easily have a good game, but I think, even though I agree with YouM3 and that IC has grown on me quite a lot, it's a situation where I still don't trust in VP's leadership with Electronic. So I think it's a really good pick. It's definitely one of the teams that I enjoy watching the most as well. I completely concur with that. I want to see them go through. I think this is the year they truly make their breakthrough. Sure, they've already kind of broken through in Blast in a way, right? But last year they sort of scraped close to playoffs in the major. I think it was Copenhagen and in Cologne. They were like 1 BO3 away from both to make playoffs in both those events. And I think this is the year where we start to see them be a factor in big event playoffs a bit more often.
It's part of the angle for why you pick up someone like Davideus. First Chilean representative to ever make a major, and then or with 9Z, and then also when you get to those kind of situations, you get to these like late stages in tournaments, you actually don't want to be surrounded by youngsters in the same way that, you know, it might get you high and they might have good ceilings, but hitting that level when you need it most is, I guess, challenging. You know, you need a couple of voices that can help ground those personalities, and so kind of hoping that Davideus can do that.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see. I think a strong Pain roster is always fun to watch. Like when they're playing good Counter-Strike behind Big0, they're entertaining. And yeah, I'd be curious to see if he could ever get under Big0 like some more talent, or potentially even if he ends up getting transported into another roster, like a true super Brazilian team. Like not just a good team with some nice pieces building up to that. Just give him all the pieces and maybe see what he can do. That's always the fun theory everyone has. You know, everyone's talking about how we can make this Furia of team work, or what if we cut these two players, brought in this IGL, this AWPA, now we're talking. It never seems to manifest. So I think if we just ignore it, stop talking about it, maybe then someone might try it. But as long as we're happy about it, it'll keep costing too much money. Never going to happen. So no, I'm going to pretend I don't want that to happen. Never have a better IGL on Furia, please. Yumi, you have another pick.
Yeah, I do. I just
They're
don't know who I want.
Still there.
I don't know who I... Well, but they're playing each other in the first round.
Exactly, you're guaranteeing one of them wins the first round game. Come on.
just the first round game.
That is such a cop-out on the fence choice, though. I would respect it. I would respect it, to be fair, but...
Then they play GamerLegion. They're basically through. It's the second round. Come on.
I'm not doing it. I'm picking Big. I was actually quite impressed, and I didn't have high expectations for Hyped coming into the roster. But I think he's actually... I know it's only been like 1-2 games. I'm hopeful for what this team has to offer. I was actually very worried that during the trade window they would lose Crimbo or JDC. And for them to have made the executive decision to remove the dead weight from this team and opt for, QB is a young guy, Hyped is a young guy. They're trying to angle with these younger German players that I actually think do have quite a lot of merits. And I'm not going to pretend like I had Hyped on my radar for roster moves. I was thinking like, who do they go internationally? Because I think they actually could have angled that way as well. But I have newfound hope for Big. I've been burned by them before. They had my loyalty for like 2.5, 3 years, even when they probably didn't deserve it. And now I'm maybe rejoining the church.
The church.
The church.
The Church of Berlin International Gaming.
Martin Luther has convinced you, but all right, the German church is not for me. But I've got to admit, they're a fun team. They are a fun team. I mean, Trav, I don't know about you, but I remember QB on Sangal and liking what he showed us and being like, damn, it's a good play. But then he kind of went off into the wilderness and kind of, that's essentially for me, just lost. So it was a bit of a surprise addition when he returns. What's your read on him so far? I mean, we've played 2 series. They played fairly well in my eyes as a team, but what about QB specifically? What about these young guys?
Yeah, it's an interesting point about QB because I think when that Sangal team was really sort of popping off, they made an RMR, right, if I'm not mistaken. It was, what was it? Was it Soulfly and Skrunk? Was that the team, the core that would have been at the time?
Skrunk, but Soulfly for sure.
I think, but yeah, I mean, I always really liked him because I feel like at the time, Soulfly was kind of like the Turkish star people spoke about on that team. Everyone was like, oh, Soulfly, like, when's he going to Eternal Fire? When's he going to a bigger team? Whatever. But QB was sort of understated in his excellence on that old Sangal. Unfortunately, I feel like that move to Fnatic for him came a bit too soon. In the sort of role, we know that Fnatic, of course, was a little bit, I'll use the word again, a bit dysfunctional. Like, you had lots of pieces that weren't working very well at all. Like, I think probably Body and Afro is the most obvious to say. But he struggled a little bit. I think in the big pressure games as well, he really struggled. I think one of the positions he plays that's very memorable to me was Jag on Ancient. And in some of the lower tier games in the open qualifiers that Fnatic would grind their way through, which I'd watched quite a lot of, he would probably pretty much own that position. And, he'd, even against some decent teams in open quals, he'd kind of just peek off of teammates' flashes pretty much all game and play that spot super aggressively. And then when he plays against sort of higher tier oppositions, suddenly that sort of apprehension or nervousness came in a bit more. And sure, you can't play the same against like a good open qualifier team as you can against top tier opposition. But I felt like he could have been a bit more aggressive, and he lost some confidence as time went on. And now he's on big. I think and what's cool about QB was he was never really around the sort of big academy, big setup for forever, right? Like he was always sort of on different teams, and now he's sort of been accepted in. He's been allowed in the front door of the church. Honestly, at this point, I quite like him and think he's doing really well. I think now he's grown. He's still a very young player, of course. Now he's sort of grown from that period of Fnatic. He's moved on to this. I think it's made Big look pretty solid. It's got some extra pieces now that, as Yumi said, like the dead weight, the more less reliable factors have kind of been removed, and you've got only reliable factors left now. And when it comes to hyped, again, I was very cautious about being excited about this because he's been, thrust in and out of the big setup a number of times, and we was like, oh, is he good? Is he bad? Nah, he's sort of middling. But I've seen him have some great pop-off performances for alternate attacks. He sort of plied his trade for so long at I thought tier 2, tier 3 level, continuing to put in the work, hoping one day we get another opportunity like this. He has, and he's missed some. He misses some shots. Don't get me wrong. He's not like any sort of elite AWPer just yet, but I think that he's now reached a stage in his career where he's at his most mature, and he understands what to do in most given situation in the current big system, which is probably the most important thing for an AWPer, despite the fact Searson was obviously getting a bit better. I think Hype has got a bit more explosivity.
Yeah, that was the thing with Searson. Like, I couldn't really count on him to have pop-off maps. You watched him play, it wasn't the Searson of old, who could online just lock everyone completely out of every single thing they tried to do. Like, if he was present, your take would fail, especially defensively. But Hype, yeah, he's got a certain bit of flair, a little bit more
joie de vivre.
Yeah, exactly. It's far more fun to watch Hyped on Big than it is to watch Searson, or it was recently. So I'm a fan of that, just in terms of as a viewer. I'm not sure where the ceiling of this team really lies. I think they're a good value pick as an underdog in this scenario, because they open up with Wildcard, who are far from a consistently solid team. Like, good caller, good pieces, but a losable game for them is Big. And then your next game is going to be a Furia who haven't really had to warm up. Like, they've basically, realistically, they're going to treat that game like deathmatch. I don't think it'll be a problem, unfortunately. As optimistic as I want to be about Imperial FE's level, I don't think that'll be a problem for Furia. So it'll be an interesting run for them. I'm not sure I would have taken them, but I do see the value in having selected them down there.
I'm just hoping that I can still get another underdog that I'm interested in. It's why I've angled this way.
It's okay. We'll leave Imperial FE for you. I know you want to load up your matchups like that. Trav, we're back to you on the snake draft. Which way do you want to take this?
The underdog pick, right? Oh,
you don't have to pick an underdog, but you can.
Oh, I see. Okay,
you can pick
right.
You can pick whatever you want.
Well, okay. I think I might have to steal one away from Yumi then in this sort of given situation. I think a pick I'm going to have to take, as it's an underdog pick, because I do think they'll drop into the lower bracket, but I actually think they're going to make it, is GamerLegion.
Oh, thank goodness. You have them.
Okay, good. Because they haven't looked ready yet, but there were some signs in Blast, right? And it's some signs with a brand new team, with Rez, obviously. It's such a huge signing, it feels like, for a team like GamerLegion. They've got Saw in the first game. Saw, I thought they'd still be relevant with SHR coming in from GTZ. It's not looked great to begin with, and I feel like they could be one of the main, sort of mainstays that we saw in 2024, sort of drop lower and lower down in the VRS as we go through 2025, and then start to fall out back into sort of more tier 2 rather than tier 1.5. I think GamerLegion beat Saw. I think now Ash has been given a bit more time with ZTR to build this sort of new lineup and build these pieces. I'm really hopeful. I've always thought PR was an absolute gamer. I mean, I loved him on Mouse and XT. I think he was one of my favorites to watch when they sort of moved on from the Impact era, right? And sure, while SHI is actually decent individually himself, the current system and decisions that Saw have made over the last 6 to 8 months is crazy. Losing Ujux and Arazdosh, whatever went on behind the scenes that caused that, just feels completely wrong. You've lost the identity of the team. That's the only identity you have left is sort of Materis and Roman, who've been playing together for so long. I think GamerLegion win that game. And sure, Pain or VP, very, very difficult. But, you know, Pain and VP both aren't infallible yet. And I would trust that Ash is, you know, we always know he does his research. They all put the hard graft in. I think they have a chance to be a decent upset team again. It can sort of continue in the vein, even with a different roster that we saw in Shanghai. And, you know, lower bracket, again, it might not be easy, but I actually going to pick them to make the main event here. I think they're one of my underdog picks.
Okay. Yumi, I have a question, because Trav said something there that raised an eyebrow for me. Do we like Rez? Do we like Rez? Because I don't know about you, but I always hear the same old adage, your time in NIP doesn't count. What if everyone else's time in NIP came when you were there? At some point, aren't you probably a part of the problem? Yumi, help me here. Do you like it?
I want to be able to combat the, Rez inconsistencies, blah 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 blah. He's been very consistently mid actually for quite a while. I want to believe that he can be better utilized by someone like Ash. I think some of it comes down to the in-game leaders that Rez has had. Some of it may be that he's not, I guess, holding his own number or forcing his voice onto the stage as much as you maybe want to see out of someone that actually did have a decently high ceiling, just hasn't hit it in God knows how long, or will hit it like once every 45 games. I think I do like Rez. I think what I don't like about this team is I need them to have 2 or 3 months together before they usually are that sort of contender upset team.
Okay.
That said, against Seoul, they will win. They should beat Seoul. I'm so down on that team right now. And PR, Rez, hell, Slend, they'll muscle through that team. Even without like Ash super strategies, they'll just beat him when it comes to head to heads. So
well, I just wanted to say my question mark is definitely still Torsen. Like, I understand that he probably does his job quite well on this team, and that's why Ash preferred to keep him. And there's no Romanian British bias, but I do think if you wanted better firepower, you keep Volt at the end of the day. But I also, the thing that sort of I questioned about that move is I do feel like Volt has always been a very pliable player, and has always slotted into particular things that maybe he didn't even want to do necessarily. And that's why I was surprised that he wasn't the man they decided to keep to sort of fit into those more, shifting around these roles that when you have these 2 new players added in. So, listen, maybe it's because they've only just signed Torsen and they want to mold him a bit more. I think Torsen is quite a good tier 2 player. I don't think he's a great tier 1.5 or tier 1 player yet. But I do worry that is going to be one of the main things holding them back when it comes to the numbers, and just because you very rarely have ZTR pop off, is what I'm thinking. So you might have 2 players that are a little bit, to use your term, a bit mid, which is a bit of a shame. But if you do have the firepower of PR Slend and a consistent above average Rez rather than just an average Rez, then I think that definitely this team has got upset potential and can make it through to the main event. But yeah, my worry is still Torsen. Long term, not just short term. We'll have to see where they go from that, because I do really, really like the pieces. I think it's the most exciting GamerLegion team since Shui and Imma era. So,
yeah, I want to see the change, and I'm like, Volt's gone, but we're keeping Towson. I'm like, my idea of Volt was kind of he's a soldier. He's doing what needs to be done under Ash, and then I'm like, the only reason you keep Towson is because, well, he's a soldier doing exactly what you want to do under Ash.
And Volt's better, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it comes down to a matter of that point, just who you think's better. And if, Trav, you believe that Volt would have been the better option, I think this just clearly indicates Ash. What he sees is Towson was probably the better fit. Not just in terms of the fragging ability, but also in terms of overall fit. I don't know why that is. I don't know what is going on. I'm not in practice. So I think that's what's going down.
I think if I had to externally vibe check it, and could be totally off base, I apologize if this is slanderous, but I think as much as Volt is a soldier, I think he's also someone that wants to be active a lot. I don't think he's someone that sits still and thinks I'm he does his role, but feels like I get the impression he could maybe even feel like he's doing more for the team. Whereas I think Towson maybe is just a little bit more quiet, accepts the orders at face value and just goes, yes, I'm doing the thing, and I'm just gonna stick to that thing. Because like you said, Volt's very pliable. He's been in actually loads of different roles. He was there with GamerLegion during the snacks calling, where they were shifting their roster continuously, and Volt was the one usually getting shafted by having to swap his spots and change his positions, blah blah blah. So I think maybe in a weird way, Volt might have been too pliable. Maybe you needed somebody that was going to be a little bit more angular and rigid in I guess how they wanted to play.
Yeah, all we can do is hypothesize. And Ash, if for some reason you're here watching this, tell us. I'm sure that will go down well.
We'd love
everyone.
to know, actually.
We'd love to know. And if you don't want to comment it, DM us all individually exactly what went on. Not to ask too much or anything. But yeah, curious to see how this works out. Obviously, a lot of us have nothing but good things to say about Ash himself as a coach, about the prep he's done in the past. I mean, the reason I joked about GamerLegion and the picking Pain and Virtus Pro, so you're guaranteed to play them in the upper bracket final. We typically say they don't have as much time to prep. It is harder to guarantee those upsets. As much as we do love them as an upset team, it's usually day one upsets. Like day one, they pick a team, no matter they play a team, whoever they play against, they're going to pick a map and win it. That just feels like the GamerLegion way. And yeah, we'll see about day two. But for now, yeah, that day one victory is almost guaranteed. I mean, not to be too dismissive of Saw, this one they come through and upset us, and Golden gets on the mic like, what up? They actually do have a good coach again. Y'all should have known. Y'all should have been afraid. But we'll see what happens.
Even if I'm wrong, I'm really happy with this pick, like as an underdog pick. Like I wanted GamerLegion. When I sort of thought about it beforehand, I was like, yeah, I want GamerLegion as an underdog pick, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, my whole angle for GamerLegion was going to be that they play Soul first. So
yeah,
it was hilarious in the Blast Bounty, by the way, that what Big picked Soul, and then on the interview with who's the coach of Soul? I forget. Golden.
It's Golden.
He was like, oh yeah, maybe they think we're like at the same level or whatever, and that's why they think they can pick us. They got absolutely blitzed the first map, and sure it was like an overtime or whatever win for Big on the second, but they got rolled, and I love that because Golden was like, they must think we're like a pushover team, we're like the same level. No, you didn't even show the same level.
They were right. They should have picked you. That was correct. But all right, I've got 2 picks now. And the thing is, I've kind of, as we've progressed, talked myself out of a couple of the favorite picks I had, and I've been staring at the list, and I've realized I'm about to do something I usually don't, but we're not on stage. This is just a play-in, basically a group stage. Give me the Kings of 2024 groups, a team who they were so dominant for like the first 6 months of the year in group stages. Their round win percentage was that of an era-defining team. No matter how badly they lost once they made playoffs, their group stage was so good. They had a round win percentage of over 60%. Give me Astralis. This is a team who you have to be kind of Delulu to think they are your Salulu. But I'm okay with that. As last year proved, every pick I make is kind of perfect. So Astralis, look, opening matchup against MIBR. I think they have the better caller, AWPer, and overall firepower, which is crazy to think considering you're like MIBR, Insani, Exit, blah, blah. Just look at these players, how they've played on the team. They do not have that much firepower. They still just have Insani, and not much else really works. You want Drop to be a good caller, enabler. Sure, I'll allow it. But Astralis, I have, in a group stage, I actually do have an elite device, Stown, Yabi, and then I have Cadian calling and Stare filling out my roles. I am very happy with that team. The problem is the stabby combo does not work when there's a crowd. That's what we've seen time and time again. Thankfully, I don't have to deal with that here. I can rely on their pure firepower to just roll through people. We saw Device in the opening map at the last event they played. He's still got a ridiculous ceiling, and his floor has never been particularly problematic when he's not had to be, 6 months into calling. Like that's when he started to really show some cracks, when he had to be an extensive amount of time just calling, prepping, thinking about the game. When he's a fragger, he frags. He still does, and probably still will as long as he stays healthy. So this Astralis roster, I see no reason why they don't kind of cruise through these matchups. At worst, 3D Max, if they face them in the upper bracket, takes a map. If they get to face FlyQuest, it's over. So yeah, I think Astralis are a sneaky good favorite pick based on the bracket and based on the reality of group stages.
Right. Do you want to? Are you keen to talk about Astralis? Because
listen, like honestly completely agree with what all KingT just said. Honestly, like I think they should make it through. They've got a very nice portion of the bracket, but like I'm just so disillusioned with everything to do with Astralis over the last like however long. It's just I can't like. Sorry guys, but I can't root for you. I can't like want you to make deep runs in playoffs anymore. Maybe Device is like the one player I could look at on this team and be like, yeah, it would be cool if he was like on a big event arena again, maybe competing for a trophy again. That would be nice to see. You know, he's not going to make. Maybe there's a chance there's not many more of those left in his career. You know, I always have a soft spot for sort of old legends of Counter-Strike still doing it and still performing well at a great level deep into their career. But like, there's a big part of me which thinks that they are like one BO3 away from just completely imploding again and having one of that really random poor performances that can just completely shock you, and they just have an off day with some of their individuals, and a team like a 3D Max, for example, could come in with their sort of solid system that maybe hasn't evolved a whole lot, but they've got their synergy, they've got their protocols, they know what they do in nearly every game, and they could, as you say, maybe take a map, but maybe more as well. As you say, Yumi, like it's really hard to know where to go with Astralis in terms of opinions. It's just they're kind of like the tier 1.5 nothing team, which is like they're gonna be there. Do I care about whether they make it? No, but they're gonna be problematic for most teams at this level.
I feel like your disillusionment with Astralis is like how I feel about Virtus Pro.
Yeah.
It's like there are so many merits to wanting to be able to pick you, but I've just been let down so many times before that I can't do it to my heart anymore. I just think it's so weird because I mean Astralis have had, I mean, this 4 people. I mean, aside from Cadian, who came in like 4 or 5 months ago, the rest of the team's been there for like a year plus, and I still see like anti-synergy between players at times, and even if you're talking about like Stown Yabby as this power combo, they don't do a lot to like link up with each other really. They never really did in the heroic system either. So like they're a combo, but only if they're separated. So I find it hard to root for Astralis when I still have doubts about whether Caden can find a form or a level for himself outside of being able to AWP. And the calling has looked like it's actually not looked that awkward with Caden in particular. But then I think I'm still let down pretty habitually by Stown or Yabby when they need to get a key frag, even in group stage games, actually, towards the latter end of the year. I just think I should be getting more output out of this fearsome duo that we were hyping so much about from the Danish region. So yeah, I don't think I could have ever picked Astralis in good faith. But then also, there's quite a few teams in the favorites that I guess are a little bit shaky. So I actually don't know where you would go.
Yeah, between rough bracket matchups, and are you gonna rely on Furia to win games for you? I'm just saying, I know which one of the ugly, like technically good, but I don't like it kind of picks I'd go for. And that's why I've taken Astralis. As I said, it's kind of Delulu. It's believing in something I saw for the first 6 months of last year until Device got literally sick of calling. And yeah, I think this sort of level will come back. I mean, they played 3 maps of Great Counter-Strike, then got smashed on Ancient by Na'Vi. That's essentially how the Blast Bounty for them went. I don't see this event having a team of Na'Vi's level, like caliber in terms of calling, game plan setups, rotates, mid-rounds, nothing. There's nothing even close to that. So I think Astralis should be good here. And it is true that the Yabby Stown duo are a completely disconnected duo in terms of they don't play with each other, they're just on the same team. But I think that's part of the threat. The fact that they are just distinct opposite sides of the map, essentially, kind of annoying you. I think a lot of teams do really well when they're actually able to be effective in that way. And that's Astralis for me. Second pick. I didn't even think the star ahead. I'm going to be honest. I spent so long during all your picks figuring out who the hell I would take as a favorite. I need to look at this bracket and think about it, because wow. I might, yeah, you know what? I'm going to go for it. I'm going to pick a second favorite, Yumi, don't worry, I'm taking them off the board. Virtus Pro.
Yeah, fair enough.
I saw enough. Let's put it that way. I saw enough from their opening matchups in Blast Bounty to kind of start buying my own hype for this team. Because I put out some tweets. I speculated. I talked about how they could play, what they could look like, reminiscing on envious Death Ball days, like back when I was young, bright-eyed, and excited to watch top-level Counter-Strike without knowing about behind-the-scenes drama, players not getting paid, all this other nonsense. It was just, to me, the top 8 teams when they played, I'd see them, and I'd go, yeah, shoot them. And that was envious. This Virtus Pro is giving me that sort of nostalgia of just, yeah, they can just go out and shoot them. And they'll do it pretty well. They haven't played, obviously, to invoke the Death Ball style from a completely bygone era. They're never going to play exactly like that. But they have players who are just playmakers and players who have shown decent synergy so far. Now, a lot of this is off the back of Flamus, like that signing, the fact that he is so confident, assertive, like he's got a super high level of risk tolerance, essentially. He will go for plays ad nauseum, and it will win you maps. A lot of the time, GamerLegion, the way they tempered it, is essentially, once the round has gone to shit, you get to try something. That was essentially how it works. If you watch his demos towards the end, the reason he's got a cast of 68.3 is because it's a 2v5 and he's just walking out somewhere to try and bring it back, because everything else went to shit. The ZTR Towson +1 sort of idea, usually Slend, has gone wrong. Flammer's trying to fix something. On this roster, it's not too dissimilar, but he has at least got a little more setup, and he's made some already awesome plays to win them rounds that have me believing in that signing completely. Like, just completely. And his synergy with Electronic on the CT side, like the two playing off each other on Train, for example, has been quite good so far. For a team who's so fresh, so new, I don't expect that so immediately. And so I'm willing to buy the stock. It's quite low. It's always low with Virtus Pro, really. But I'm buying it to go back up, even despite the questions I have about Electronic's leadership, especially on the T side, and what he can actually figure out in a mid-round, figure out if things are going wrong. I have those question marks, but I do think he has the talent on the roster, and the talent and belief in himself, really, to make these sorts of wins happen.
I have a lot of thoughts, so I guess I'll go first. I think the advantage that Electronic will have is that they've made two good signings in that they've strengthened their front end as well as their back end with both Flamus and Icy. I think Icy as a defensive AWPer is actually one of the better ones that we have in the circuit, especially when you're thinking Russian speaking. He's I don't think as aggressive, as dynamic as some of the other AWPers, but I think that's fine. He puts himself out there more than James used to, and while simultaneously, you have a Flamus that can be in your face and be aggressive, and that's who he is. It's actually what I think. I think that the great shame about Virtus Pro is I almost wish James didn't start missing shots on the AWP towards the end, because I think even if he wasn't calling, he could have been comparable to an IC if he was kind of pushed to do so. And had they replaced Flit for Flamus, I actually think this team could slap considerably and actually have, I think, better calling than I expect from Electronic. I'm down super bad. I'm down super hard on Flit. I'm not down bad for Flit. I think Flit is completely just sitting on the laurels and the reputation that he had from Forza into early Virtus Pro, and he has been underperforming in his positions for so long now. So much so that Norbert was the most exciting piece on this team once upon a time. So I think Flamus is a really quality signing. I think Fame is actually kind of getting out of his shell a little bit as well from the early exposure with Electronic. But yeah, this team is, I think, going to just be one of those mixed bag. They'll randomly make a top 8 at tournaments type team, but I don't expect them to win anything. I think it's the big downfall of Virtus Pro when they make big signings like Flamus or Electronic. I just don't think they're actually going to progress past this potentially breaking into playoffs team.
Yeah, Trav, you was down bad or down hard? That's the real question. Where do you lie on the down meter?
I don't know. Like, the thing is, I think for like one of the main things that actually like excites me, if you look at the percentages in my head about like what excites me about VP, it's Flamus, it's icy, it's, oh my god, they finally don't have Jame and it's a new era, so it's actually an interesting team. Like, that's kind of like how I see them right now. And I actually, I agree with Yumi, like, Flit and Fame, sort of that duo toward the end of the Jame era was definitely really just uninspiring completely. And I was really worried about their direction. And, whether that was down to the leadership by whoever it was at the time, I don't know. Because they were always like that sort of dynamic duo that you could rely on in every single VP game to make it a tough game. They were known for making every single game almost like the worst nightmare of your opponents, right? They're just been an annoying team to face for everyone in the entire elite of Counter-Strike. I'm not sure if they can be that team again with the electronic style. I think they do get blown out of the water by the sort of more elite at their current state, and I actually don't think that's going to change for quite a while. I think like if VP play a Na'Vi, Spirit, G2, Vitality, sort of that top four, I just don't think they get anywhere near at the moment. Even in multiple attempts. But Flamus does excite me. You're absolutely right. I've really loved him since the very beginning on sort of Namiga. I think Icy. I was put stock in Icy from quite early on, and I liked him quite a lot. Even I think pre Cloud9, even I thought he was quite a talent. Maybe even just slightly even pre Amcal. Actually, thinking about it,
I think I started fighting you about Icy at one point. I was like, he's not as good as you're making. You feel like you're pitching me this big game about Icy, and I just don't see it.
I know, but it was a while. Like, don't get me wrong, there was a lot of progression that needed to come from him. Amcal was a start. We saw what he could do, and then it was okay. He falls off a little bit. In Cloud9, it was again a bit of just a mess of a team in many ways. So it was. We saw progress, and that's probably the only thing you could have hoped from him in a team like that, because I think that's where he's grown as an individual and probably as a person as well, considering how that team sort of began, traversed, and ended. I think that he kind of proved himself to be one of the main men in the end on that team. And now getting his move to VP, I think it's nice for him. I think he's as you say, he's not necessarily going to be super explosive. He's going to be a very reliable factor. You're going to rely on that rifling core of Fame, Flit, Flamus. I do wonder where VP go past the triple F era. Like, who do you remove first? Is it going to be Flit or Fame? Like, I don't know. I would want to see something more from them. I want to see, because VP as a name, you expect to be, as KingT said, they're going to make some top eights, they're going to make some runs, but you want, their goal is to compete for trophies without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, everyone's team is that. Everyone's goal is that on a team, but you've got to be realistic, and I'm not sure they can do that in the entire calendar year almost. Like, Electronic in-game leading is just, I just don't see a world in which he activates these players again.
Yeah, and the best part for me is I don't need them to win a trophy here. I just need them to get out of the play-in. So
yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Thanks, lads. Thanks you for the warning ahead of time. If they do make Katowice, as I think they will, I won't pick them then. I don't think they'll win that. But
yeah.
This sort of level, this bracket, they have the individuals. That's essentially the take. Summarized. Trav, I mean, the team list is getting spotty. There's a lot of duds. Yeah. There's also I think some interesting picks to justify here. So where are you going with it?
I'm going to go with a really, really boring favorite pick to make it through.
Is he picking Liquid?
I'm picking Furia.
Oh, Lord.
I just think they have a slightly easier bracket. Like, I don't want to say, oh, they're playing Imperial FE in the first round, they're going through easy. That's not what it is. Like, I think they're going to have a game against Wildcard and Big. I think we've seen them play those two obviously quite a lot in recent times, and they do struggle quite a lot. Struggle as in it's not an easy game; it's quite close every single time. When it comes to Imperial FE, don't get me wrong, I was as interested and fascinated by the game against Na'Vi as the next guy. I think it was really, really fun to watch, and just having them in the scene at this level is it was just going to give us an extra layer to these events that make them really watchable. I mean, just have to look at the viewing figures for the Na'Vi game, and it wasn't all due to Na'Vi, right? It was a good 0.5% almost. A good 50%, I feel like tuned in almost for Imperial FE, knowing it was them.
Let's also not pretend like there weren't a lot of people hate watching, because there probably were a lot of people hate watching as well.
But listen, a hate watch is a watch.
I know, they still count. Like, thanks for the money, I guess.
I know. But yeah, like they honestly, they were put up a really respectable game. You're probably right about the fact that going up against Na'Vi was the perfect choice, considering it won't hurt their VRS too much. it's a team that doesn't have necessarily an out-and-out star that can just run them over every single round. But they had some really nice ideas and really good mid-rounding. If they play Furia to the same way they played Na'Vi, I think that's pretty respectable, because Furia are a completely different team. You know, you're going to have, even though there are some players which you look at and say, they're a little bit meh, like Skulls has improved quite a lot now. I mean, Fallen is actually more reliable than I think you expect him to be at sort of his age in this factor of the team. Like, they actually had a pretty decent end to 2024, did Furia. And sure, the Yuri and Keserato, that duo is not as dynamic as it once used to be, not as sort of out of this world as it once used to be, but they beat Imperial FE. They play Wildcard or Big. We've mentioned Big about their current sort of, you know, where they sort of stand in the scene, where you don't know what they're going to look like, but also are hesitantly impressed. I think if it's Big they go up against, then I think it's going to be one of those very, very close games. It's actually quite hard to call, but I do think they make it through. And actually, I'm going to call they make it through without needing to drop into the lower bracket.
Oof. Yeah, that's the thing. They've beaten Wildcard in overtime to BO1, beat Big in 3 maps, but map 3 was an absolute slaughter, so it's kind of like, when you come out of it, you feel, oh, a bit rough for Big, but overall, Big still took a map in that matchup. I have to be reluctantly agreeing with you that they probably do make it out this bracket unscathed. As much as I do think there's a rough matchup waiting for them in terms of the overall scoreline, I still think they end up winning it, just because they have the star power that no other team in this group does. Like, no one else has a Keserato level player. And it's not that we consistently see that every single game from Keserato. It's just that we see it frequently enough that I think it's gonna power them through this. And we've seen improvements from not just Skulls, but I think the way Cello fits in, and also Fallen's calling and AWPing. Gradual improvements, not huge leaps and bounds. If they had improved in leaps and bounds, we'd be talking about them winning events, but we're still far from that. We're still talking about a team whose rating is 8th in the world, or ranking rather, whilst also at the same time everyone feels like they're maybe like 16th in our actual. We had to put like brackets head to head, everyone would have them probably a bit lower. Just that Rio run, just boosting them for now. But I think they're a dangerous pick. They're a team who are overmatched. Like, other teams playing against them in this specific group are overmatched by their star power. And yeah, those little improvements are going to do a lot. I think those little gradual improvements are just raising the floor more than anything. And that'll probably keep them consistently making it through this level of bracket. I think that's a good thing for them. And hell, if they can get a top out when they get to the actual main events from Keserato, from Yuri, and the very best of Fallen potentially, yeah, we can talk about them making deep runs. But for me, it's just about that floor coming up to meet this
the
level
floor
of
used to be
opposition.
so bad.
It used to be horrendous.
Like, honestly, like the amount of online games I'd see them play where they'd lose to like Gun 5 before they were actually respectable, you know, like games like that. It's like, it was horrible to watch
Furia
at times. But
versus any 5 European players, it felt like pretty much overtime, like, was guaranteed. Like, that was sort of the vibe you got for a long time.
Yeah, genuinely, like, you go into one of those online games that they play because they kind of just probably wanted game time, and were like, okay, they're losing this game. Like, it's actually not even close. It's obvious. But that is why a lot of credit has to be given, to be fair, I think, to basically the entire setup. Like, to have a team where Keserato isn't the 1.3, 1.45 player every single game that he used to be, it shows that they're not just relying on him, and the system is actually like growing slowly, and it's genuinely not that awful. Like, they're at a decent level in this particular play-in and World Counter-Strike right now, where sure, they're going to have to move on from Fallen one day. We don't know who that's going to be, but like, I got to give them their dues. Skulls has improved a lot again now since playing, back in his mother tongue, speaking Portuguese, Brazilian. Like, honestly, in the Brazilian team, I think he's improved a hell of a lot. And sure, I think actually, surprisingly, going into this team now, my biggest question mark will continue to be Cello. He's not in easy roles, but I think I've seen him whiff a lot. So if you're going to change another player, Furia want to make another step up, you get a more consistent player from what is now a raft of options in Brazil than Cello.
Well, just to theory craft and jump off that for a second, if MIBR continue to not be that impressive, like, can Insani just get a shot? Actually, like, I don't know.
Do you want Insani to be taking the opening fights that Furia create for their riflers?
Yeah, well,
Really?
yeah.
There's a reason
Fine.
Yuri's trading stat is so high. Like,
Fine, get exit then. I don't know. Like, if that's what you really want. Yeah, I don't know. While you're talking through them losing the Gun 5 and losing to like random European mixes, all I could think of is, well, Imperial female. They have they have 5 players that
they
actually
have 5
do
European players. That's true.
that do shoot. Well, people would say Lebanon, half, which depends on which map you use.
That's not about that. It's just about Zaz being a key part of the Swedish scene. Like a
Yeah,
Swedish
but
flag for like 10 years, and now I've got to change everything overnight.
But then Haji, but then Haji as well. And
European to me, it still will be.
I know, exactly, me too. Yeah, I think when you're painting that picture about them probably playing big in the following round and playing it close, I immediately had these visions of just Fallen out-orping hype or hyped in like key late round, like 14-14 type scoreline. We're in an OT, and he's just hyped is gonna read the position and just miss, or like Fallen is gonna literally just outpeak him. And I think that's the one thing I will credit Furia with, is not only, like you said, the system has improved and they do look better since the art removal and I guess detoxing from all of that nonsense. But they just have an experience gap. I don't even think it's a firepower gap, because as a duo, I actually think I would give a lot of credence to JDC Crimbo versus a Keserato Yuri. I'd even say hyped is better as an AWPer versus than Fallen on a consistency merit. Maybe they lose out on Skulls to QB or Tabson to God, who am I thinking? Maybe, or Tabson to Cello. Actually, no, Tabson wins that. But I think everybody on this team, as much as I think Crimbo or JDC can just win rounds single-handedly, Tabson has actually fallen off in some of that late round impact and having like crazy good mid-round calls or good macro choices. That I think the experience gap is going to be what gets them, not the firepower.
Also, just very small point as well. I know it doesn't really mean much, I feel like, at this point anymore, but at the major, they beat that really close 2-1 that we spoke about. So, to be fair, it wasn't close on map 3, but they kind of did that without much impact from Keserato at all. It was Skulls, Fallen, Yuri. So, yeah, I think if Keserato is even like 10% more online, that should be pretty easy. I even think there's a world in which, as we know, we've spoken about, Big can change from promising to completely the opposite in a matter of one map. So I think there's even a world where they could play Wildcard Furia. But I think Stanislaw will come into that game with a really good plan, and I think there's a world that could be the case. But I just looking at their portion of the bracket, having a favorite pick open, my last favorite pick, it's like, well, I just kind of have to pick technically the highest ranked team. Just an obvious one for me in a good portion of the bracket.
Yeah. It all makes sense, to be honest. It all makes sense. I can't hate it. Yumi, we're back to you with another double pick. Take your pick. I mean, do you want 3D Max and LBR or Liquid at favorite? Like that's a choice right there. You can start with your underdog and come back to it.
I know, but I feel like I feel like I have to do this now. I'm picking Liquid.
There we go.
I did think for a bit about 3D Max, but it'll all make sense later on. Yeah, I've gone with Liquid. God, why do I like this team? I mean, I really did rate the Nerd signing. I guess I was surprised that Heroic were able, or I guess going to give him up. But there was going to be vacancies on their roster because they needed to sign a core, and I guess, to be honest, Nerds probably wanted this move more than Heroic did. I just think they've got they genuinely have a lot of firepower, and I don't even care about Ultimate on the AWP right now. Maybe we'll have a conversation down the line about like the same things as Complexity about Holzerk and whether or not he's doing enough in that position. But from Nerds to NAF and Twists, you've also got a JKS that does sort of 1 in every 5 games have like just maps where he just takes over and stops all bomb site takes, which is great. I think this team has like a considerably, I mean, it's a significant ceiling, and I don't think that's a surprise to anybody that this team has a significant ceiling. I do still worry about their T sides, and that's the downfall of Twists on in-game leading, is that for the first couple of events we were like, maybe he can do it actually, but as with Device, you know, as time goes further, it becomes harder and harder to make that work. But I want to say that Mither will find something that works, at least in the short term. In the opening few months, I think they will find something that works. It's just the transition to the rest of the year that I would worry about with Liquid.
Yeah, I was on the same page as a lot of people, where I'm like, I want another move. And that move typically that I call for is sometimes just to annoy people, but also because I think it's kind of functional, is like a Hooksy for JKS kind of switch up, where I'm taking a supportive piece, a more passive piece, not supportive really explicitly, but a passive piece out, and I want a hard entry who's going to call. But that's kind of my question for you, Trav, is how do you envision them going forward with like balancing the entry roles, who's taking those sorts of hard entry positions? Because so far, statistically, it's JKS. And
it's
been ugly.
I know, they're in such a weird position right now, Liquid. Like, they got a good team that, you know, has proven they've made deep runs in all the important recent events, but also they're like a step away from being more of a factor toward those top teams, and the roles still also don't make sense in many ways. Like, I would still prefer if Twist wasn't an in-game leader, which is why your point about Hooksy being on the market is very interesting. How would they rejig it if they suddenly signed him and got him into the mix? Like, that's, you're losing in terms of numbers and firepower there. You're losing one of the main factors, which I think is currently like making Liquid somewhat relevant, which is consistency kind of across the board when it comes to your numbers. But Ultimate had his off period. Then he sort of recovered a little bit at the major, but again, I still think there's room for improvement there. If there's an option on the market that comes available, I think Liquid might want to try and take that up. I think Ultimate's been a wonderful servant in the short time he's been on this Liquid team, but he's also just not. He was that guy at the beginning, but it was sort of like a honeymoon period. He's not really that guy anymore. And now, if you're talking about like the roles in the team in terms of the Nerts, the JKS, the Twist, whatever, I see Nerts as sort of one of those space taker players that isn't like ridiculously aggressive, but he kind of does it anyway. Like, it's like he might be out of his comfort zone, I feel like, a little bit on this current Liquid, because it's maybe he's in a role that will force him to be a bit pacier than he wants to be. It's really hard for me to gauge how they are, because again, it's only seen maybe a couple of games with him on the team. I want to say that they're going to be a factor, but they need, as you say, they need another move. You've got that consistent core of Twists and Naf and JKS that will always sort of keep them around there, I think. But I'm still hugely worried about their T sides in general. I don't think Twist is a bad caller, and where he's sort of taken Liquid in the short amount of time that he's had is really genuinely respectable. But to push to that next level, he needs to go back to being that guy again. And they need a leader. And, if you want to risk on Shuri, is that a system that works for Liquid? I'm not so sure. But now that all that Mao's drama has come in, they will, if you'd be stupid as any organization not to consider it with him on the market. So it's tough. I think it's a good pick. I think they'll probably make it. If it's not through the upper bracket, it's definitely the lower bracket. There's a good chance. What is it? They play maybe Complexity in that one if they lose. So yeah, I think that they need a move, but they're in an okay position in World Counter-Strike right now. It's kind of how I view them.
Yeah, I think what's frustrating about Nerts is, I think this is something we've brought up before, but I miss the old Nerts where it was like opening fights, slow down in the mid round, pivot off of Nerts, like that is exactly the player that I want him to be on all these teams, and like he wasn't that on heroic really. They didn't utilize him in that same way, and I kind of fear, I guess, that he won't be used in the same way here for Liquid either. But I think it's a really good win condition to facilitate. So I'd be surprised if Liquid don't try and pivot in that direction, because I think I think they actually need more players that can kind of hold their ground in mid-round situations. Like I worry for ultimate in mid to late rounds, and I guess I would worry for sometimes JKS as well. I think as much as he's like a reliable piece, sometimes it looks like he loses focus in the mid rounds when I guess the call is coming in, so to speak. So like Nerds and Naf are our two mid round guys, but I just need to see Nerds actually utilized properly for that. So
Yeah.
But I think they've got a lot of punch, so that's why I like it.
Sure. It's just for me watching them play in Heroic, it was like not having a guy who's a default, like de facto up-tempo entry opener meant that, sure, they played Mirage fine, but you can play Mirage in what I call like cheekily just like a spread offense. Like you just split very heavy open and slowly lurk forward and make sort of probing looks. It's not like not the only way you can play Mirage, but it's a definitely legitimate style on the T side. On other maps like Ancient, Anubis, I do think you kind of need to be a little more explosive, and sending JKS into those opening fights, which I saw them do on a lot of explosive early set plays, just doesn't suit him. Doesn't suit him for shit. And I know the community loved the idea of like, oh, the JKS entry, like when he was a stand-in for FaZe. That's what we were going off of. A CSGO, like stand-in period. That's what you want to do? No, come on.
Not relevant.
The reality has been a harsh slap in the face for anyone dreaming of that version of JKS to reappear. And yeah, I don't think his pretty face can save him from constant speculation of an IGL coming in, especially now with Shuhei on the market as well. I'm just saying, I'm taking that move.
It would be a shame, but he would be a quality pickup for another, probably another top team if they wanted him in a role that he's more suited for. So there's still some rejigging to do. I mean, we could, obviously, it's not the episode for it, but like there are so many moves that sort of didn't happen during Rostermania that might still happen, and some that probably won't as well, which is like, okay, that probably should have happened then if you were going to do something. Why is it happening now? Why is it happening in 3 months? Whatever. So I think Liquid are one of those teams that could, sure, they made one move, but it could be more, absolutely. So yeah, we'll see. I like them. I think they'll make it, but yeah, it's a good pick. But at the same time, it's like, where next to advance?
A bit of an oddball. Yeah.
Just some things don't quite click. And if it did, it'd be crazy, right? Like it would be.
Yeah. And their T sides, as you say, like I used Nuke as an example earlier. It's not just Nuke. Like they have a really, really good CT Nuke Liquid, and then T side, they get comebacked on every single time, pretty much.
Yeah, it's difficult to watch. But Trav, you've got one more pick left to fill out. Oh no, sorry.
No. I have my second pick. Yeah,
I didn't see it. Sorry, we forgot.
But all will become clear as I've picked the other, and I say other, Asia Pacific team that we have in the field. I'm going FlyQuest for my underdogs. Okay. This is bias. Sure, I don't care. I'm not Australian, but I want to believe in this signing. You know, they bring in Regali as a replacement for Alistair, who Alistair can hit highs, but man, his floor was really, really low sometimes. Regali is just there to strengthen that floor, and then, you know, as the months develop, maybe he gets star level numbers. And to be honest, Dexter is shooting harder than he basically ever has against like top level teams that I've seen when he's playing with Australians of all things, you know? Like even when he had his ventures into Europe, he didn't find the type of output that he's getting on like entry positions, which is crazy. So right now I'm very up on Dexter. I think Vexite as well is getting some good output. What's weird to me is that right now Inns doesn't seem to be getting as much influence on these games as I guess I'm used to. And I'd hyped him up as the best Australian player, even when everybody's like wax lyrical about JKS and the Reddit's so in love with him. I actually thought Inns was the better Australian for a while. Just even in the down periods for FlyQuest, he would just always look so good. And right now, I think there's some struggles on that front for this squad. But I think we're getting better consistency out of a young Vexite who has always struggled with that consistency. Liaz can clutch, Dexter on entries, and Regali. I think I've had a conversation with Tea Time about this. I think a lot of the front for Regali is based off of old reputation or maybe like a flashy game that people have seen from him. And I just want to see a good floor. And that's all I ask, because I think that's all FlyQuest needed to start breaking into some of these playoffs. And then they can think about bringing an analyst in or another coach or whatever to level them up just that little bit more.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm always questioning how good I really think Inns is, and if I think Liaz can work consistently at the top level, and Dexter, can he call and frag enough to carry what remains? I mean, I'm never going to hate a Regali move. Been a Regali stan for a long time, and every time he finally gets a chance, I'm like, yes, look, go watch him. And then you watch him, and it's great, and then he leaves the team again, you're like, oh, what happened? And then
everybody hates him somehow.
Yeah, and then I listened to Bird from Sky interviewed, and he's talking about how he doesn't think Regali, like this is about 4 months ago, I think, just Regali doesn't have a chance to make it at the top level now. Like, his time is over. And I'm like, it's definitely not because he can't shoot. You said as much. Regali might be the most talented player in Denmark. For context, Regali lives in Denmark, speaks Danish, as much as he is Romanian. He is also kind of, in the Counter-Strike sense, Danish. So I was just like, how do I pair up what I see with my eyes? I can't deny the talent, the skill ceiling, all that stuff. Then also what my ears hear and my brain starts to process. Like, why don't people like playing with him? And what's going on with his career? Like, why is it not progressing at the rate I want it to? And if he just basically gets to play Regali deathmatch and just like flick people out, like multi-kill, he can do it with an AWP rifle or pistol, so whatever the gun situation. If he gets to just do that and put up numbers, FlyQuest, might generate a couple more upsets, a few more wins, but I don't think it's quite enough to shift my view of them from trying to qualify for group stages to maybe they can make a run at playoffs. Like, I don't think there's enough there in just a Regali move to really convince me. I don't know about you, Trav, but for me, it's a nice step, but it's not everything.
Yeah, I think the step is a really good call. I mean, what Yumi said about like the conversation you had with Tea Time, like right now, my thoughts of Regali, I can't believe I'm saying nostalgia for something that happened in 2023, but I am. It is kind of nostalgia bias from his Copenhagen Flames time still for me. In my own head, I'm imagining him being the best player in Tier 2 by quite a margin. It wasn't close, really, that Copenhagen Flames era. He was unbelievable. Yeah, he was putting up like 1.7s nearly every game or to the like. And there are so many games that I covered of that team back then that just convinced me entirely that he was the next big thing and deserved an opportunity. And then, obviously, that CSGO, we transitioned into CS2 with OG, and that OG was rough to watch in many, many ways. And I think that kind of blew his confidence out the window for quite a long period of time as well. As a, excuse me, as a CT AWPer, okay, but as a T AWPer, it felt like he was lost very often and had no sort of impact. And it was sad because I always liked him. I thought that was an absolute slam dunk move. He's had to change region to get another opportunity at these big events, but I think that maybe even at 22, at this sort of point of his career, when he's had a couple of opportunities like that already, like OG, like the Fnatic, just academy setup as well. Maybe that was his only option, and to get back to this level to prove he can do it, it was a good call. The floor raise is something that I absolutely agree with, and if Inns improves a little bit again, like Yumi was sort of mentioning, maybe a little bit lower form from him that we saw last year, this team is definitely dangerous, and they're one of those teams that I feel like can actually upset teams that maybe you wouldn't think they wouldn't get anywhere near, which is like surprising as well. I mean, FlyQuest, if you look at the bracket they're in, right, 3D Max, Astralis, MIBR, like, I really do feel like they can beat all of those quite, like, not even a stretch of the imagination to believe they can beat all three of those in that little portion. So I quite like this FlyQuest. I think they're very easy to cheer for. They've got good personalities, great merch. Their new lineup's pretty sick, I've got to say. I might have to spend the shipping
They
fees
don't
on
ship
some
to
of
the
those.
UK. I've tried
they
messaging
not?
them about this.
Oh, for God's sake. Anyway,
I know.
I'll have to maybe get ourselves in with Regali or something. It's like, I casted you in Tier 2, send us a jersey. But yeah, like, genuinely, I've liked him. I'm really on board with you on that one, KingT. Like, I've liked him for a very, very long time, and I'm hoping this is like a slight redemption arc that could actually get him a slot at one of these international projects in the future, or even maybe a Danish project, knowing his roots.
I think the only thing that I'm worried about in terms of like rebounding in his career by going to another region is that, we've seen it with Fozy, we've seen it with Slacks. I think both of them have hit new heights because they play in, domestic competitions that have actually kind of added some extra confidence to how good they can be. Yeah, Regali's, I mean, FlyQuest aren't participating in regional competitions or these like in-house Aussie leagues where they can just bully people and feel like they're the best in the world. So I think when they're playing at these top tournaments, it'll be a tougher road for Regali to bound back in the way that some of these other guys have been able to do by switching regions.
Yeah, hopefully for him it gives him that knock, that boost. But we'll see. The much anticipated though, Trav underdog pick is up next. Finally on time.
God.
You've got 4 bangers to pick from.
Right. Like, I want to go really crazy, but also like I don't at the same time. And there's the one really obvious one, and there's one that I think actually could do it in the bracket they're in. So hard.
Yeah, I actually think this is the toughest choice of the evening.
Yeah, because I want to be a bit more interesting, but also because I've already had a boring pick with Furia, so it's like if I wanted to, I mean, I'll just say it, like, who cares? If I wanted to be boring, I'd pick 3D Max. They got like the core,
they're a favorite, so you couldn't take them anyway.
They're a favorite.
Pick underdogs.
I have to pick underdog. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Well, either way, if I wanted to pick favorite of the underdogs, maybe considering no one's picked them yet, maybe I'd pick 3D Max. But I want to be a bit more interesting considering I picked Furia, and as an underdog, I'm going to pick Wildcard. Now, there's a reason for this, and that's because I just think that the Wildcard we saw in Blast against Astralis was not representative at all to the Wildcard we saw last year, and actually early this year as well, beating some okay online opposition in that Frost and Fire event, no matter how bad that Frost and Fire event might have turned out to be. Like, they definitely still have ability in the bracket they're in. I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to go Wildcard. I think the sort of story arc of the careers of Susp and Fuzi is really cool. I think they're like, I didn't see them sort of coming to the fore on a team like Wildcard ever. Like Stanislaw with Swedish player, it's just wild. Like the whole team is just crazy. You just didn't expect this in any stretch of the imagination, especially last year. But I think like Stanislaw's in-game leading is genuinely like, I think it's crazy about Stan's in-game leading is I actually saw it in North American qualifiers for like smaller events and occasionally some ECL. Like his calls were really solid. Like, he was clearly probably the best in-game leader in the leagues and in these qualifiers that would have seen him in their region. And he's kind of kept that going, surprisingly so, in like some of the games we've seen from Wildcard over the course of however long. And the portion of the bracket they're in, I think I feel like almost certainly get to lower bracket round 2 if they do drop there. I think they have some decent firepower at this point. I think JBA's kind of got over the hump of maybe some of his nerves. I think that he'll probably get over it in Kato in like 1.5 games, maybe, rather than an entire event that we would struggle in, like people were questioning him being his fall off on LAN, for example. Sure, Shanghai was a bit more studio based in sort of hotel rooms, but still it was LAN. There's some really good pieces here that are big that maybe aren't ready yet, but are okay. But also we've had question marks over because they've never been consistent in years. And then you've got, if you beat Big, you've got Furia, who you've played close in the past. I think that's actually a good matchup for Wildcard because I think Stanislaw's got a good idea of how to beat Furia from a couple of the games I've seen and from like his style compared to Furia's style from what I've watched. So I think this is a bit of a more unlikely wildcard pick, but I do think there's a solid chance they can get through the lower bracket and make the main event.
For me, this is you picking them made me look at my picks and go, yeah, I've butchered my order. I should have taken them instead of VP because there's no way you two could have taken them off the board. There's no way YouM3 picks VP over Liquid. That would have been...
I actually could have. I might have.
You would not have.
I might have.
So no, I'm kind of mad I've missed here because honestly, for a lot of the matchups they're going to have, if you look at the play-in bracket, I think they have the edge in Caller.
Yeah.
Just straight up. I think Stanislaus the best IGL in that sort of section. I think they have a rifle trio that, whilst don't theoretically, like a lot of people, impress, they don't really like them. I remember having podcasts with like people like Sonic. Yeah, well, he kind of fucks. And Susp is one of my favorite players right now. Like in terms of consistently delivering frags, he just does on this team. And despite everything that could go wrong, sometimes goes wrong with Jaber, for example, and his mental game isn't the strongest. You know, he has his ups and downs. As much as he is a great talent, no, I do think there are pieces on this team that really impress me. And yeah, the Fuzi part of it, I think Fuzi versus Hyped is kind of like the battle of like who's going to actually become a legit top 10 AWPer. Like these two guys are just on the edge of tier 1, and their teams, both of them kind of doubted. Both of them had to make sort of a comeback. It'll be a fun matchup. So no, I like Wildcard as a pick. I want to go for them. They are a definite underdog though. Like when you think about it, there's no surefire superstar on this roster that's just going to win you a game. It has to be calling and the collective. And that's a lot to try and depend on, you know, with any consistency.
I'm going to be, I mean, you guys already have said like, oh, he's the best in-game leader in this side of the bracket. I think he's probably the best in-game leader in this part of the tournament, if I'm being completely honest. Like if I had to go purely off of like cerebral power, I think Stanislaw actually is better than every other in-game leader in the play-in.
What a crazy statement, but it's not even like that wild.
Mentally, yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
but I don't CS2 and fragging matters, but like, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think, you know, if I had to do like coach in-game leader dynamic, you know, I'd give Wildcard the edge, so to speak. But if I'm just thinking in-game leader for in-game leader, he actually might be the strongest one here because God, some of his calls actually do just look like he's watching the minimap sometimes. Like
it's so good though.
I know it's actually crazy. He'll make like a 35-second call. We're gonna go A, and then like 10 seconds later, just think, actually, you know what? Let's go back. Let's go back, and it's like the perfect decision. I don't know how he manages to do it to this level, especially so late into his career. But yes, Wildcard have the problem of they don't really have a proper star. And Sonic was
Jaber. We're waiting.
Sonic was kind of like the most punchy piece for actually a long stint of time for Wildcard, and yeah, Jaber's missing. Susp. Actually, yeah, I think we had a conversation about Wildcard before, T, about Susp and I guess him not really, and I guess kicking the North Americans when he was over there.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's actually kind of impressed and found, I guess he's found his slot. I think is the important part. I felt like there were times where he wasn't sure how to approach mid rounds or like where to be in the pack. It feels like that's way more solidified now. So. Wildcard are definitely an inflated team in the ranking, but they are definitely a deserved underdog team. I probably would have put them like 5th or 6th in the underdog category, in theory. Even maybe angling for complexity over them, but even then,
I would not have gone that far.
Yeah, I would have had them over complexity. Yeah, I think just Stan's career arc is just so cool and crazy, and like, you know, even playing in those ESEA League advanced teams with like random bedroom orgs that he would like put together, teams he put together, he'd have decent results on them, and he'd just stick with it. And now he's here. Probably one of the last players that I would have predicted would be on a top 20 team competing in Kato, like maybe over like a couple of years ago, year and a bit ago. Like just his recovery and sort of reappearance has been pretty stunning, and might actually be one of the coolest comeback stories in terms of a singular player in recent times.
From Spermy to Katowice, what a comeback! That's one of his teammates from his B-Hop team.
Yeah, I actually remember that. Like, I remember that. Yeah,
you know, he recovered from that low, looking at the scoreboard and seeing Spermy on his team.
I just looked up this Spermy guy. He's 31 years old. Come on, man.
Yeah. Men don't grow up, they just get old and grey. That's all that happens. Yeah. That's what they say. Yeah. And now, Trav, now that you've stolen my pick, I do have to decide. Do I want Complexity, Saw, or Imperial FE to close out the video?
Oh, goodness.
Well, given the way we talked about Furia, or given the way that we talked about Big, and you're like, oh yeah, they're gonna play Furia in the next round, I immediately thought, yeah, he doesn't have the belief
No,
for
I
Imperial
don't.
play well.
I watch enough women's CS. Like, I've done my bit. I've actually been a viewer consistently and made videos. I don't need to pretend that I think they've got a chance. Like, I'm not going to gaslight anyone. I know they're going to get trounced. I don't like Saw at all right now.
That makes 3 of us then.
Yeah, just no. I'm going to have to pick Complexity. Complexity, who have... Now, the entirety of that 4-team group has been picked. But Complexity are by far the weakest. I just can't bring myself to pick anyone else from this selection. Looking at the roster, when they came in, like announced on Twitter, I was like, who the hell is Nyx? And honestly, it's gone way better than I ever expected to. That's saying a lot, considering they played one BO3 and they lost 13-10, 13-10 to VP. But when my expectations were, they're going to get 13-0'd by everyone and go back to tier 3. That was pretty impressive. Like, all things considered, getting 10 rounds twice against VP was more than I expected. So shout out to Nyx.
Let's say Nyx, yeah.
Everyone calls him Nyx, so I don't know why it's written so strangely and annoyingly. And Sixy or Sexy, we know which one's more appropriate. Actually an okay fragger for like American play. Like, when you watch him play in NA, you're like, oh, this guy can bang against these players. What can he do in EU? And we saw against Virtus Pro it wasn't that much. But I still think the eye test tells me he's got some value to add. So given that Grim showed us a little bit of star level play, just for a bit, against VP, it's not impossible. It's not literally impossible that they win a crazy upset game against one of these 3 opponents. I kind of have to say that though, don't I? Like,
if it was BO1s, it would be more of a chance. But now
BO1s and they got to play
everywhere.
like Dust 2 only and Mirage only or something like that. Some puggy ass map, maybe. But they have to win BO3s against Eternal Fire.
I know. It's
not happening. Grim, you're good, but, well, you showed us a bit of good in the last series. You're not out-fragging Xantares. I just don't see it happening. So, reluctantly, Complexity on my pick, just because there's the slightest chance, I think, relative to the other 2 options, that they get a win here. But no, I have played myself, and that's the long and the short of it.
Complexity did a very pragmatic move in that they not only sold Elige, but did they sell him or did he leave?
I don't know.
I assume there must have been some money exchanged for Elige. And they also got rid of Floppy, so suddenly their purse or like the salaries they have to put out are actually considerably lighter for Sixy and Nyx, who aren't, to be honest. I think everybody rated Sixy quite high for quite some time in the North American space. He just had some problems showing up and just showing up actually when they need him most. So I actually have very high hopes that he can, he's turned a corner in his life really to provide some consistency to his career in Counter-Strike, because he's actually very good as sort of like a tier 2 North American player that probably deserved a chance up if he didn't have issues outside of the server. So I guess I'm hopeful on that front. I do just think that there's no superstar on this team, which is, Elige's shoes are massive to fill. I understand that. And he already did more than enough of his time with this team and gave them more than enough chances to improve. You kind of need Holzerk or Grim to become that guy, unless you're just banking on younger, lesser paid players to somehow be the next thing up when they haven't been touted to be. I think there was more talk about Rek and Swisher even before the M80 move that you could have wagered that way, but complexity in not finding the prospects, or North America not finding the prospects, so they are a weak team, and I guess only time will really tell whether they develop into something better than just a team that's last pick.
Yeah, the way I feel about complexity is that the Sixia and Nyx pickups are like stopgap pickups that might keep them like relevant and keep them invited to these events for a good chunk of the year. And then maybe when like contracts start to run down on some of the M80 players, M80 will finally think, okay, maybe it's time to let them run free now, because I think pretty sure they've like locked them up on M80 for a pretty decent amount of time. So I think long term, Complexity's goal is almost certainly like your Rex, your Lakes, your those sort of talented players that can like take over a server sometimes from North America. I think they're sort of, for me, not even because of the moves they've made necessarily, just because of like, even though JT's system is absolutely solid as a rock, right? I mean, I think if there's one sort of, he's not North American, but if there's any IGL from North America that's not Stanislaw that could play on Complexity, that I'd want to maybe fix a team with two what many people would consider random additions, it probably would be JT. I think he's got very good at that sort of thing. Whether it gets some results, I don't think so. And as I was sort of talking about with Saw earlier, I think they sort of fall into that 25th to 30th ranked sort of team over the course of the next like 6 months, and they'll get invites to some of the bigger events, but it'll be very hard for them to do anything. And maybe once Complexity, as I sort of said, like now that you touched on, not having a Legion obviously, and Ploppy actually frees up a little bit of money, perhaps accumulate a bit of that, go for a blockbuster move to really get the NA fans excited again and get one of those players that we truly know to be a star already, not one that we think could be a star or like a decent tier 1.5 player in the future, e.g. Nick 60. So if they upgrade those in time, then I think they'll be back. But for now, they'll drop down a little bit. They'll show up in games. Like you mentioned the 13-10, right, in Blast. That was okay. That really was okay, considering the start. I also played Train, which is a jump into the unknown for many people. So, I think it's not going to set the world on fire. They're playing the long game.
Hopefully. Because when I first saw the signings, I thought, oh, they're just not playing. They're just going to be an NA team now. They're not going to play in Europe. They're not going to play international events at all. They're just going to play NA for a bit, find a new backer maybe, and then try again. But hopefully for your sakes, they are playing a long game.
It was the whole thing with the roster window, is that everyone thought, oh, they should upgrade their pieces, and then everyone just looking around thinking, does Complexity even have the money to do that? Because there was a lot spent in the reacquisition of the company. So yeah, I think they've made a very pragmatic choice. Like, yeah, we've made a bunch of cash off of these guys, or one not having to salary one, and I did find it was Elite to get sold to FaZe.
Okay,
Now we're retaining some of that capital, and maybe they can redistribute that down the line. I think it's a good choice, but like you said, Trav, they have to be able to maintain a decent enough level that they can slingshot back into the space when they do actually have that capital or a big signing.
Yeah, it's going to be the difficult part, a difficult balance, I think. And maybe if they can play that. CCT does do NA events now, like for the last, I'm not sure it's the entirety of last year, but it feels quite recent.
Problem is that like a lot of those teams, even at Complexity's supposed level, even if they do drop down a little bit, they'll be hesitant to play them because it might like even disadvantage them, right? Like we know they all pulled out of ECL and stuff. So like I think what was it? The teams that pulled out of ECL, it was M80 and Wildcard that pulled out of ECL, right? So yeah, it's tough. Seems tough.
Yeah, they need to play something though. So
true.
We'll see how it goes. No, but I think that's going to wrap up the picks. Has anyone got a particular hankering for any of the 4 teams left, which are Imperial FE, SAW, 3 Max, MIBR? Anything you desperately need to get off your chest when it comes to these 4?
I do think 3D Max can very easily be a spoiler to quite a lot of our choices. Like don't get me wrong, I don't feel like they've advanced as a team necessarily, like as some of the others have. Like they will be a team that will get overtaken by sort of lots of other sort of tier 1.5 rosters. But the fact that they stay at a really solid level makes them problematic for nearly everyone, I feel like, in a player. Like every game, I was looking at it now, maybe bar... Oh, it's tough. But maybe there's only 2 teams, maybe a Liquid on their day, maybe a Heroic on their day. I think they give a good game to nearly every single team in the play-in. Like, I don't think they might not even win half of them, but they give a good game to nearly all of them. So they're relevant enough to be the spoiler for all of our choices, for sure.
we've almost I feel like we've almost disrespected 3D Max by not picking them. I did
Yes.
really consider it.
Agreed.
They are a favorite though. That's the problem. Like if they
Yeah.
dropped one slot lower in terms of where we have like the team,
That's why I made the
team
mistake
seeded,
earlier. Yeah.
they drop one lower, then yeah, easy pick if they're the highest rated underdog. But if they're lowest rated of the favorite group, you've then got to essentially look at our teams and be like, who do you make the case for? And I think the best case would have been in terms of people who could have picked them, probably me instead of Astralis. But you know, I'm banking on that top end of Astralis more than I'm banking on 3D Max's constantly giving everyone a good game, you know, to kind of make it through. They should beat FlyQuest in the opening matchup in my eyes. I think that's for them just an outclassing of a lesser team.
Yeah, so we'll have to see.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
I think that's going to be a lot closer.
I'll
think
take
that's going to be a bit of a
Lucky
brawl.
over Australians, no offense.
My rules of Pokemon and like a leaf versus a devil or like a fire type is probably not very good, but
yeah, I was about to say Pokemon logic is not where you want to go with this.
Yeah.
Because Pokemon logic definitely favors the fire, but no, I think that's a real problem because if they beat, well, as I expect, they beat FlyQuest, they then play my Astralis pick, things might get a bit ugly. That's okay. That's okay with me. I'm like, they are still 3D Max. As much as they give everyone a good game, that also includes teams who are theoretically lesser than them. So playing up to competition's fun as long as you don't play down to the rest. And they do have a tendency to, I think, go to both extremes. That's one of their big weaknesses, their flaws. And also the fact that they are, well, they're French. They're that French tier 2 team. Like, let's be real. That team always exists, and they're never that good.
They just don't have like an incredible ceiling, unfortunately. Like,
yeah,
their floor is great, but they just don't have a lot of variety.
Jocko, I really thought Jocko would be that guy to give them a ceiling,
Sure.
you know, like because he was so explosive in so many games I watched him in tier 2, but it was like probably the most volatile player I feel like on 3D Max right now. Like he can absolutely blow people out the water, and then some games he's invisible. So yeah.
He's definitely like the most improved player as well in like the French scene, I think, to be honest. He went through many iterations of just being, well, he was super inexperienced, and then he was playing like hard anchor roles, and then he actually
Double
is
pony represent.
Yeah, now he's kind of like a bit more versatile, a bit more dynamic, which is, you know, exactly what 3D Max need. So
yeah, I mean, I'm always wishing for a French team to be successful. You know, a top French team is always nice. And we're starting to see pieces emerge, I think, left and right in the scene where you're like thinking, oh, if I can just unite Apex and Zai with these three riflers, maybe it could work.
Nate as well.
Yeah, exactly. Nedchu's one of those pieces, and he's been amazing for ENCE so far. Just a question of the other two. You're like, oh, who do I want to rely on? But yeah, you'd think 3D Max would have them. I don't really think they're that good. My
last thing is, please let Exit call again. Thank you. You can kick drop and get somebody else maybe.
That's the segment on MIBR as well.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. Now we've covered everyone. Except the last two underdogs who we've indirectly or directly in some occasions roasted a fair bit throughout the show. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. A tight 105 minutes. Roughly the length of the Samurai, if anyone's seen that. Hopefully this was slightly less boring in terms of the pacing. Trav, thank you for joining us.
Of course,
yeah.
Pleasure.
Leave a like if you enjoyed. Comment your thoughts on all these picks, who you actually like as an underdog, as a favourite. Sub for more content. And remember, members get extra content and the right to vote, etc. Have an opinion, have a voice. It's lovely. Pay me. All right. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.